To this week's episode of The Main Event. I am Martin in the chair as always. Adam still recuperating, so we are filling in and doing our best, keeping the home fires burning, as it were, until his return, which means I'm joined by my good friend David Edgar. How are we, David?
I'm good, Martin. Thank you. Yes, we're doing our best to keep the tent open, and just it's nice though because it gives you and I a chance to wander off down a side alley, which we enjoy in terms of our conversations, and just chat about kind of more general things that perhaps we don't have the time to get into during the show. I mean, goodness knows we're 4 shows a year now, so it's hard to find any more space. So yeah, this is a nice little cul-de-sac while we wait for Adam to catch us back up.
Sometimes you just take the oar out the boat, put it down in the water, and just stay and drift for a wee bit, which is what we're doing until Adamski's back. A couple of weeks ago, we did a bit of a trend thing and shot the shit about coverage and the changing nature of coverage. And last week we did the most male thing imaginable, which was rank football finals. We're going to do a bit of both this week because we're talking about managers in the era we've covered. So 92, 93 to 08, 09. The ones that have stood out, the changing nature of football, managerial style and role and understanding, or has it changed at all? And then, of course, we'll rank our top 10, individual top 10s as we get there. David, if I can, just because it's been on my mind recently, in another show I do, I am able to do other bits and pieces. On Ness and Dormer, we did a show on Bob Paisley, who retired at the kind of moment in time that we're looking at. And I had Tony Evans on, who big Liverpool fan, but he was the sports editor of the Times for about 20 years or something. And we're just trying to understand that Liverpool boot room, Paisley in particular, but that culture, how it worked compared, of course, to what we would call the modern era, 1992, 93 onwards. And I found it a really fascinating conversation. You can go and listen to it if you so wish. But it was really... They created a dressing room, a training ground, the squad environment, which was a psychological hothouse, basically, of mental abuse in some cases. It was bullying, is what we would know it now. With quieter guys, I mean, Bill Shankly, obviously not quiet, and very much created that kind of environment. But Paisley was a wee bit more reserved, but hard, ruthless men in charge. Men, a kind of coalition of kind of managers and coaches, of course, in that boot room. And it was just wanting to see how their men, and I'll use that word repeatedly because that's how they saw them, acting, reacting to one another in training. And again, they would not sign players who they didn't think were psychologically able, effectively, to deal with a game themselves. They would give them a broad outline. This is how we play. We don't really change for many people. But if you're playing against Brian Robson, you need to be wary of this. Playing against Hoddle, you need to be wary of this. Don't do that. Some specific instructions, but not overloaded with information. And if the game starts to change, you fucking sort it out. And if you're under a bit of pressure, you don't have to be told. You don't have to look to daddy on the touchline to direct you into position like a pawn. You sort it out like men. And absolutely the leaders, the three Scots in particular, Souness, Douglas and Hansen. But that's how that all kind of came about. And we actually got to talking about Souness in his later career. And he said, I spoke to Graham, and he said, look, the first ever coaching course I ever went on was actually after my last job. I had no intention of going back in. I just wanted to know what coaching courses did and what they were saying, because all I did was take on what I was used to at Liverpool and applied that throughout my entire managerial career, which went from obviously 86 to what, late 2000s, Davey?
Yeah.
Probably was into the 10s, but covering exactly what we're talking about here, I guess. And I was always told at Liverpool, we'll correct you once, we might do it twice, we won't do it a third time because you'll be out. And again, just this intensity. of pressure inside, and then you'll be able to do it outside, kind of thing. And I went in this course, and all they said was positive reinforcement, positive reinforcement. I said, why didn't someone tell me that fucking 20, 30 years ago? Because it just simply didn't work, obviously, or it had more diminishing returns as time went on. That would strike me in terms of the prehistory of the Champions League, the old Champions Cup, and this era. Forget tactics for a minute, but just how managers responded and reacted and engaged with players who were becoming increasingly wealthy at a younger and younger age.
Well, yeah, I mean, any job, any work environment reflects the times in which people are formed and grow up in. So you have to remember that guys like Paisley, Shankly, etc., they were the war generation. They had grown up with that, or with national service, which didn't stop in Britain until I believe late 50s, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It was done. So they had grown up in an environment where you were given your instructions and then you got on with it. You weren't micromanaged. You didn't have someone standing over you, and it was very straightforward. This is what you need to do, and if you do, you get praise, and if you don't, you get there is a punishment for it. And it was a very kind of straightforward and binary world. So I can absolutely understand that. I do find it fascinating when I hear players from that generation. They almost try to play down there's a very Four Yorkshiremen thing to it, Martin. Well, this tactics, we didn't have any tactics, and of course they did. They maybe didn't sit down with a blackboard and be given dossiers, but that just what you said there. We're playing Man United today. Brian Robson does this, so your job is to that's tactics. It was just done differently then to how it is done now, and it was very, very much, as you say, though, that thing of take responsibility. Now, as we've progressed through the time period we're speaking about, and obviously there are things like data and far more information available, but we also got the coach as chess player, as someone who we used to joke, didn't we, about Rafa Benítez on the touchline telling his fullbacks to move 18 inches forward, where it became about control. And I think if someone looks over the football the last 20 years, control is a key word, because that's what Pep system, and that is the system that football has adapted, has been about at heart. It's about control of the ball. That way the opponents can't do it. That way you control the match. And it's really just a further reach on that coaches now want the players to do precisely what they tell them, to the letter, detailed instructions. And it's unsurprising that players have you and I sometimes criticise this about modern football. We get frustrated when we see not just the team we support, but we see it when we watch games from all over the world that, they need half time for a reset, where it's fairly obvious what they need to do. But you and I will get frustrated saying, why is someone on the pitch not saying, right, lads, for 10 minutes, we sit back here, and that's no longer really an option. And nor are they coached to do it, and nor have they grown up doing it. Whereas you're right, it was automatic back then. You can see how the game's going, lads. And I do think it is a fundamental change in management, where the predominant desire, most coaches, there are always exceptions, but most coaches I want to control the match. We do this through possession. We do this through organisation, through always knowing where to be. The rise of the repetitive training, where you just you recreate things.
Drills. Yeah.
Automatisms, as they're sometimes referred to, where it's just second nature. That really wasn't a thing back then. You would practice things, sure, but a lot of the Liverpool training was games. Five-a-side games with a lot of touches, but not doing. You weren't given specific situations, and they would come up, of course, but it wasn't right. We're going to practice this 100 times this week so that it becomes second nature to you. So I think that that's definitely become more of a thing. In a way, it kind of reminds me of film, Martin. In the sort of auteur director. I think that football, again, when it looks back, in particularly 2000 to maybe 2000 and certainly 20, it's been the rise of the auteurs. It reminds me of, you know, the late 60s, early 70s Hollywood, yeah. And those directors suddenly then they took full control over a movie. They wanted to, they'd come from previously being almost like the old trainers, you know, the hired hands of the studio. Could you just guide this film through to completion? This is what we want, and go and do it. And then it became, no, they had visions of how it was to be done, and scripts had to be tailored to. They needed certain stars to do the roles. It wasn't a case of being handed things. That's kind of what's happened at top level man, and this is the top level of management, the Champions League, of course. That's sort of what's happened here, and there is a deference now to it. And I know that it's a frustration of yours, and I'll finish up my point, kind of turn this on to you, because this is something I've heard you speak about a lot, and I always find it very interesting, is that football has imbued managers, I believe, with agency far more this century than it ever had previously. Now, managers were always important, but I think that we have given them, and clubs have given them, a level of agency that previously maybe wasn't quite there.
I think that's true. Certainly true in this country. That I think maybe to make up for an intellectual deficit in the more abstract nature of the game, in our writing, in our, you know, mainstream media, that's why when Jonathan Wilson's Inverting the Pyramid came out, it was such a breakthrough, because people in Britain weren't reading or writing books like that, really. And if they were fucking, you know, Charles Hughes and that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it was redressing that. I wonder, and maybe this isn't really a conversation for the elite level, which is obviously what we're talking about just now. I am talking about the further rungs, of which we're obviously a part of. That yeah, I think we've probably gone too far the other way, and what we absolutely have abdicated, when, especially when seeking to redress ills and problems, manager has to go, because he is in charge of everything, and that on-field autonomy, leadership, character, intelligence. This game's turning. Do this. Now, I'm not talking as if this is something, you know, new or whatever. You know, Baxter inverted. He swapped fullbacks in a League Cup final against Celtic in '64.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, this
Just because we're getting in trouble here.
Our
I am
team,
moving
Rangers,
it about.
we would see this, you know, Butcher or Goff, right? This is what's happening on the field, making the changes, and a manager who was happy to allow them to do that. I don't believe players have that autonomy now, and I think managers would actually be annoyed at them for
this
doing
is
it in certain circumstances.
In certain circumstances, yes, because it is all right. So a game's not going your way. It's plan A better.
Yes, that's usually.
Or trust the process. Just trust the process. Or the manager changes big things, and he moves things. He moves these little pieces about. He's been very canny there, because he's what he's seen as is a difficulty, and
which can only be done at half time, of course.
Well, probably, or you know, sometimes you get wee instructions. You see what he's done mid game there. You know, he's very, very clever. These little puppets that he's able to kind of move. But very rarely is it, you know, that game was dead, and that guy stepped up, and between the three of them, they managed to just either stem the flow or, you know, get something back into the game. I personally, I might be wrong, but it's just my kind of perception and observation that when games change, it's because of the auteur on the corner. Now, go back to our conversation, and what I need to be kind of clear about is there isn't an argument that I think data has obviously increased in general. It wasn't unknown to be getting, instructions about players. That goes way back, but the level of that detail
100%.
and everybody getting their own personal dossier, that kind of Mourinho. That kind of Mourinho preparation is something that's going to come on. But right before the Champions League era, you have Johan Cruyff winning with Barcelona, a purist or a Puritan, depending on your point of view.
But both can be accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. But certainly a view on the game, an approach to the game that would, well, I guess it wouldn't be out of place now. His disciples are very much in place and have been for some time. And you've got Saki.
Saki, yeah, huge.
Who is going on the training pitch and ensuring that those drills and drills and drills with players, defenders who cannot be a certain, distance, or more than a certain distance apart from one another, and really being hands-on. That was nothing new either. So it clearly that that kind of thing it existed. Capello would also win the Champions League very, very quickly as well, and in a couple of finals, 2 other finals. So the pragmatism and the purity isn't a new conversation. Might have grown in Britain, perhaps. I think that might be fair to say. Who still did, well, it's up to you, boys, and get them riled up and get them fired up, or have a man management and whatever. And maybe that was the lesson of the 90s, that that's not really going to work anymore.
Yeah, definitely, and this was highlighted, I think, to me growing up with England's return to European football, and how they just could not see that football had changed dramatically in the time that they had been away. And it wasn't simply about the style of football. It was also just about management of ties. One of my frustrations, even as a youngster, was I just don't think Britain, and Britain, I use that term because it was Scottish English sides, ever really kind of understood the away goal rule at that point and how it could be used. They just saw it as a part of it that you had to overcome. And the amount of times clubs would go away from home and draw 0-0, Martin, and go, that's a great result. Is it?
Yeah.
And then, of course, a British side would welcome a team back. The team would score in the first 5 minutes, sit back and go, right then, on you go, and get done on the break and lose by a couple. And, of course, we know that the physicality of English sides in the late 70s, early 80s, and, they could play a bit, don't get me wrong, but the combination was enough to overcome maybe more technically gifted sides. That was not the case in the early 90s. And it did take English clubs a good few years to get used to it, because a lot of this stuff was new. I mean, you mentioned there the Mourinho dossier. This is in the period we're talking about. And at the time, it seemed revolutionary. And now, of course, I can't imagine a Premier League side or any Premier League footballer of any club not being handed during the week his own personal dossier by the army of coaching staff that now work in data analysts within football. It simply wouldn't happen. But this is an innovation within this time period that we're discussing tonight that came along and has grown since then. I bet you the dossier that was handed to Frank Lampard in 2005 is dwarfed by what will be handed out to even someone like Brian Mbeumo, as he's going to go and do his business for Brentford this weekend. So, yeah, football caught up. And then technology changed again. Football doesn't exist in a bubble. And you could look at things in a different way. You could analyse things during games instantly. You and I sit on the gantry at Ibrox most weeks, and we will pass 2 banks of data analysts, Rangers and whoever the opposition are. When we do that, they're there and they're sitting in there, they're taking stuff in instantly, and they're noticing trends, and they're passing this down to the management teams. That obviously wasn't something that could have been done even 25 years ago. It just, the technology didn't exist to do it. And this plethora of information that has come up, and it's being used. And then there are bigger things. These are all factors that have influenced changes of managers. But I'm glad you highlighted the two that I think are the two most influential in this period we're discussing, which is Cruyff and Saki. Saki's pressing game. I honestly, it must sound so weird to youngsters to hear that pressing was once novel. You know, is it maybe that they probably can't imagine a time it didn't exist? It would be like the internet. You know, if you said to, I remember a time we didn't have an internet. I think that pressing might be like that. Saki, with this, we can attack when we don't have the ball. Revolutionary. Now, common, but revolutionary. And the intense running style. And it was a different sort of running. To a phrase that sometimes gets laughed at, but again, every team now does it. Tactical running. When you don't have the ball, your job is to be here. Your job is to push up and do this. He was the man who pioneered that. Cruyff pioneered the style which, you know, was taken on by Pep, which is possession, control of the match, discipline in terms of when you have the ball, staying in certain areas of the pitch. In some ways, almost kind of, you know, an evolution of the Dutch total football of the 70s. And it's been taken on by various managers across it. Jurgen Klopp, for example, at Liverpool, taking on large aspects of, and at Dortmund, sorry, to be fair, taking on the large aspects of Saki via Ralf Rangnick, I think it's fair to say. Gegenpressing, where it's about as much what you do when you don't have the ball as when you do. And Liverpool, at the very peak under Klopp, I know he always had generally good teams, but you know the side I'm referring to, the Salah, Mane, Firmino-led side. They were devastating when the opposition had the ball. That was different. That was kind of different to the other side of the game, which was the we want the ball all the time thing of Cruyff and his disciples. But again, one of the things that Guardiola had taken from that other style was the 3-second rule when they didn't have the ball. You know, win it back within 3 seconds. And his Barcelona team, one of the finest exponents of that. So, yeah, I think right at the start, you've got these two coaches whose influence will spread throughout the game over the next 20 years and get tweaked and get amended and get changed. And all of these things, I think, play huge roles within it. You've got Mourinho, who, for all his technical acumen, which is huge, a wonderful man management. You've got Ferguson's ability to absolutely wring the most out of his teams and his ability to handle changing generations. These are all different skills to just pure out and out on the field coaching. And then I look at someone like Arsene Wenger, who I think is correctly identified as a very influential coach, someone who changed a lot of attitudes in England in terms of conditioning and whatnot, but someone who kind of, for me, under-delivered in this level. So many different personalities, but I do agree. I think these two defining styles, with branches off from them, of course, right? But you can kind of see where the DNA leads back to, I think, in most modern coaching and most successful sides. And for me, and of course it will go further back than those two, but for me, for where the purposes of our conversation, that's where it goes back to, just that pre-Champions League era. It was the Saki and the Cruyff coaching, which was, it opened so many eyes.
Come back to it when we have a look at our top 10 managers, and some of the ones again in the era we've looked at, and just how many of those are in the top 10s, but in our top 5s, 3s. are very, genetically related in football terms to those two, because there's maybe an interesting parallel with how I started the show, which was Liverpool. Very quick point on your away goals, which I know is a bugbear of yours in terms of British teams in the past.
It drove me nuts. It doesn't
Yeah, it
exist
drove me
now.
nuts. It doesn't exist. And to be honest, even its lack of appreciation hasn't really existed for a long time. British clubs did get to grips with it, but a lot of that did actually come back to Liverpool, losing first legs, and famously coming back. Saint-Étienne, Mönchengladbach, and the spirit of Anfield and the noise just would carry you through. And that again, character, the ability just to deal with that. They'd always get an early goal, until, funnily enough, that 82-83 season, the first season in sixth, that there wasn't an English winner. Liverpool lost 2-0 in Poland against Vigil Lodge. Phil Neal scored an early penalty. Here we go, Anfield again, and they get picked off. They won 3-2 in the night, but they were 2-1 down for large parts and tie over. But yeah, an interesting window into an older time. Okay, let's have a look at our tens. Anyone who... here's the first question before I get to these tens. Did you have any non-winners in your top 10, or do you want to give a shout out for those who didn't win but still achieved by, breaking barriers, getting teams who should have no business being anywhere near those echelons?
I did think about this because one of the guys who actually I thought about was Unai Emery. It's not our time period, but that sort of thing. Someone who takes an unfashionable club to, great heights. And the one that kind of jumped out to me, and I'll just make sure I'm getting the pronunciation correct, Martin, because I've made a balls.
You just say Dynamo Kiev if you want.
Well, no, Lobanov is in there, right? But the one I wanted to mention was Juan Rocha of Panathinaikos.
Well, we have given them their flowers, haven't we?
We have given them their flowers, but I wanted to just make sure I got his name correctly, because he's Juan Ramon Rocha, and I thought I might go with Juan Ramon, and that's not really his name. That would be like saying, David Alexander.
Yeah,
exactly. It's part of my name, but it's not the full thing. And they were semi-finalists and 1-0 up after the away leg against Ajax. That fabulous Ajax team that I think we all agree is one of the best ever Champions League side, that was pretty dominant in the mid-90s. And they got taken apart in the return leg, unfortunately for them. But this was not a one-off campaign, Martin. This was not a campaign that sort of foundered. And another guy that isn't in my top 10, but he did win it, is Rafa Benítez. Because that isn't a great Liverpool side. And I get DNA. I do. I understand it. And I get that they had some great players, but they also had some very average ones. And they weren't spending, comparative to the very top sides at the time, they weren't spending as much. So it wasn't just spend either. I think that at his peak, Benítez' tactical management of two-legged ties was as good as anyone's, and often better. He had no right to win that European Cup, but for me, believe it or not, he's claimed to. I don't think you can win a Champions League by accident or flukily, but you can have a great year. That's a different thing, right? Sometimes, you get a tailwind behind you, bit of momentum, fate's on your side. You still have to go and do it. To take them to a final 2 years later is the thing for me that says, aye, that That's the thing that changes it for me. So he would be someone who doesn't make my top 10, but I think he does deserve a mention because that's a fabulous achievement in a very packed field at the time.
No, I would agree. He was outside my top 10 as well, as was... I'm never convinced or I'm never sure whether he kind of got there by accident and his kind of subsequent career has suggested that it was maybe absolutely the players and the story of his club that he managed to success after he left would again suggest there's maybe more to it, or he was, the John the Baptist to Pep's Jesus. But Rijkaard just misses out for me as well. Set some things in place. I'm sure. I mean, Adam's gone on in great detail about that. But yeah, he was one that just missed out for me in that period, of course. I'll go first then at 10. I have Lobanovsky, not a winner, but Kiev punching, Kiev very attractive, Kiev very much a neutral's favourite at many times throughout the 1990s. Looked like they could well get to that final 99. Again, this rich history, and we're going back talking about students of the game, detail managers, big ideas, rigorous coaching. He ticks a lot of those boxes. Didn't win it, had no right to be in conversations, to be honest. Had a special forward with a special relationship with his partner. That goes a long way to winning big football matches. But yeah, I'll go for Valery Lobanovsky. Or Adam probably wouldn't have spoken to me again. He won't be listening. But who's your 10th?
My 10th is Hector Cooper.
Wow.
Why you sound surprised?
Because
he didn't win it?
He failed with a very... Now, again, there's a lot of bridesmaids' tales here, I think. Mm-hmm. I think we spoke in good detail 2 years in a row, obviously, about Cooper. Now, should Valencia have been in, a bit like Kiev, should they really been in the conversation?
That's it. That's it.
At first glance, no. But then you look, as we have, especially that midfield, there probably wasn't a better midfield in Europe than Valencia's midfield at that particular moment in time in terms of its balance and composition. But he choked. I think his players choked, and I think that emanates from him.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I still don't think that you can take away from the achievement. And the second year wasn't a choke, Martin. It was a penalty shootout, which can happen. But I think that
notoriously.
yeah, that is true. But I think that it's a massive overachievement to take Valencia to the two finals. And the reason that we look at that team, of course, some good players in there, was because he made them into good players and he fitted them together really, really well. They were a thrilling side to watch as well, which I think is important. But yeah, for me, I think he definitely deserves his ribbons. 10th is 10th, by the way. It's not, he's not on the podium.
All right. Your 9?
My 9 is Otmar Hitzfeld.
Wow. Okay, well, I thought we were pretty well placed in our rundown of finals in terms of, I think we maybe just got a couple that were in the exact same position, but at least in the ballpark. Right, on you go.
I think he's a coach that history's kind of forgotten a little bit. And I think he deserves a wee bit more respect in general than he actually gets. And he's got one of the big silver things in his collection, so you can't rule him out on that ground. Again, not a side that I would have considered a favourite. And there were other good performances from other clubs that he managed as well. So no, I think history's been a little unkind to dear old Otmar.
I think you've underlined just how unkind history's been, because he has, in fact, 2 of those big things.
Well, there you go. Right. So I personally think you pick up Oh, that's right, of course. Yeah, but I'm doing.
Yeah.
Do you know what this
That's
is?
Bayern, so it doesn't matter.
This is Adam. Yeah, this is bloody Adam and his anti-Bayernness that is getting to me. But no, yeah, for me, so highly rated in the 90s, and then he's just slipped in because he wasn't. He wasn't handsome and he wasn't cool. And the next iteration of managers, they didn't wear bench jackets, and they weren't kind of dour looking. But he built some very, very good football teams, Martin. And
Oh yeah,
two Champions Leagues to his name. So, no, for me, I think he deserves his place.
you'll hear a bit more about him later. I promise, much later. Ninth is Fabio for me. Love him, but I think this again, where our dates work for this thing, 93 to 09, we're going to start 09-10 soon. And in 2010, his name's in the mud. I mean, anyone who associates themselves with the England national team always runs that risk. But his styles, his methods, all prehistoric by this point. Where, in fact, at the start of our project, he's one of the boys. Following on from Capello, of course, from Saki, of course. 3 finals in a row. Should he have won more than one? Possibly, but there are reasons around that 93 final. He probably didn't manage that well. It was a strange selection we'll get into. 95 was two supremely well-matched teams. But the one he did win, my word, as we've waxed lyrical about, there's no need to do so again. It is, of course, 94. But I guess, and I love that game. I love that performance and what it all meant, etc. But it's more what he means at the end of our little period here and how aged he has become and his ways have become that just push him down into 9th for me. Your thoughts? Well, is Fabio further up your list? Will we get your thoughts on him a bit later on?
You'll get my thoughts on him a little bit later on, yes.
Cool. 8th, this might be a little surprise, Ferguson.
That's bang on. No, it's not a surprise at all. Yes,
we've got one. We've got one. Yeah, I mean, listen, 2 Champions Leagues. How many teams did he engineer and all of that? And the greatest domestic football manager of all time, almost certainly, in terms of modern trophy halls and whatever else, or trophy halls in the modern era. But I think he should have won more here. And his 2 wins are, do I say flukes? Because I don't really believe in that, really. But they're scrappy old fucking things, aren't they, really? Which, again, is why I think, as we've discussed in 09, set him on a course to play in a particular way, because he wanted a far more definitive Alex Ferguson Champions League win. All things being equal, he doesn't win either of those finals. Obviously, Terry's penalty, and Bayern just being a bit too sloppy in that final stages of that final, as we know. So has to be there, but I Martin Downford just should be higher. Should have won more. But I guess some, including Rob, I think, would say that's hypercriticism.
Yeah, well, Rob's got a wee bit more emotional attachment than you and I do. Look, I think Alex Ferguson is one of the greatest football managers of all time, and I think the fact that he was winning a European trophy a quarter of a century apart is remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. I can't imagine anyone doing that, Martin, for the reasons that we've discussed. Football management changed so dramatically from when he first was winning trophies, and including a European trophy, to when he was winning European trophies. And that, for me, is incredibly impressive because adaptability, which I don't think he gets an awful lot of credit for, incidentally.
No.
Different styles in different ways. I really think that he is one of the all-timers because to do what he did for the length of time he did at the level he did is incredible. I mean, there is a bit of a difference between managing Joe Harper and managing Cristiano Ronaldo. and he was able to do that successfully.
Yeah, absolutely.
From managing Drew Jarvie and managing David Beckham, these are different. Christ, they might as well be a different species. Never mind different types of players. So, but he won 2 European Cups out of about 20 goes, and a lot of the times he had better sides than the sides who knocked them out. I mean, he should certainly have reached the final the year Dortmund won it. Don't think that's unfair. There's a couple of others that they should certainly
Monaco and Bayer, Leverkusen
Monaco
for
and
sure.
Bayer.
I think Rob makes a compelling case that we were maybe a bit harsh on the Dortmund one, just because of circumstance and whatever else. But ultimately they didn't do it. They had better sides and didn't use maybe those better resources. But again, it's hypocritical. But we would literally try to name our top 10 Champions League managers. I mean, it's the elite of the elite we're talking about. So that's where the margins go. Right, so we're agreed on 8. Do you want to go 7?
7 is Pep.
Ooh.
It's the period we're discussing.
Yeah, totally.
Right? If we are discussing the period, even if we're discussing this at the end of the show, like when this show is done,
it's
he's much further up. But I thought you might actually appreciate my stickler for this. For I am picking people on base what they did in this period.
No, absolutely right.
And he did very well. And he was on the way to becoming what he became. But he wasn't there at the end of this period. I think he kind of speaks for himself. It wasn't simply what he won. Well, that was very impressive. It was the way that they won it. It was a success. There is sometimes a feeling that, Barcelona, people do write off Rijkaard. You were spot on to mention him earlier, because people do write off Rijkaard, I think, a little unfairly. That there was, when Pep came in, that team was breaking up and things needed to change, but there was a culture of recent wins there. It wasn't a sleeping giant or anything like that. But the youngsters, the style of football, the new style of football that was played, the way that they utterly dominated for a few seasons, I think absolutely deserving of his place in this top 10 at this time. But there are people I think who deserve to be ahead of him in this period.
No, I can't argue with that. I'm slightly further up my list, but for the same reasons. We're catching him at the very beginning, and if you roll this forward 10 years, then it's very much in the top 2 or 3, if not 1. My 7th, again, slightly like Ferguson. Just I'm disappointed that you should have done better, and that's Marcello Lippi. 3 finals in a row, 1 win on penalties in Italy. Got the team wrong against Dortmund, just didn't happen. Got picked off. Probably still a better side than Real Madrid, didn't happen. And it's frustrating because they were the team of the mid to late 90s. Perhaps for dubious reasons, but they were a sensational outfit. I just think, again, just come up a wee bit short when it absolutely mattered, and that's why he's further down than I would like him to be. But those are my reasons for Marcello Lippi in 7th. Pep's 6th for me, by the way, so we can kind of move on. Who's your 6th, or have you get Lippi further up the charts to speak about him later?
Yeah, I've got Lippi further up the charts. 6th for me was Rijkaard. Because I think, again, he gets slightly overlooked. That was a brilliant side. I went to see Barcelona. I went on holiday to Barcelona and they were playing, so I went to see them. I didn't specifically take the trip to do it in 2001. And they were a fucking mess, Martin. I mean, they really were. And people say, they signed Ronaldinho and everything was fine. It wasn't. It wasn't how it worked. And he did a really remarkable job with them. And it'll be interesting, actually, when we come to, or when people come later on, because we won't get to it, about Zidane, that how high heel feature. And it's the same thing where people sort of just go, oh yeah, they won those European Cups, but how much of it was to do with them? And I think Rijkaard suffers from this. I think a little unfairly, to be quite honest. But that was a thrilling team, incidentally. Overshadowed by the Pep team, but
obviously.
But this one had a little more colour for me, in terms of the way that it played. It was a little bit, the kind of music I like that isn't technically perfect. That there's some room in it to kind of move off, and there's some room in it for things not to be totally pristine. That I think adds a little bit to it. That's what this side was. Also, it had Deco in it.
You're a big Deco man.
I'm a big Deco man.
I guess the counterpoint to Rijkaard is that you're absolutely right. It was a fun team, a team full of verve and ability. His component parts were incredible. Did he use them to the best over the period? I don't know. He probably let a lot of things go in the name of fun. And if Ronaldinho had stayed, what does Messi's career look like? Because there was certainly a kind of suggestion that Messi could follow more of a party path than the professional one that they eventually did. So this is the big interesting conversation about Rijkaard. Did they win in spite of him, or did he use? Did he get the most out of that group? Not entirely sure. His career's a funny one, isn't it? Just in general.
Very, and that's what makes it hard, like Zidane.
Because he just fucking did
that and fucked off.
Yeah,
one thing I will say is, look at what they were up against in that period. There were some strong as shit.
There were, and we've talked before again just how strong European football was in the noughties, in terms of that dense competition. So I think that's a fair point. I'm maybe just slightly shaded by Euro 2000 in Rijkaard, and again, did not get the best out of that group.
No,
and
that's
maybe
fair.
just a bit too light on some big players that maybe just needed more of a stronger hand, I think.
But maybe he learned from that experience.
Maybe, but yeah, just such an odd situation. Right, we're breaking out the top fives. You go first.
Carlo Ancelotti.
Okay,
if you ask me who the greatest manager in Champions League history is today, then it's Carlo Ancelotti. But again, I was hamstrung by the period that I was involved in. There's this sort of thing from, this is a pejorative term, but he's not on the show, so I can get away with it. There is a thing from the kind of Pep fanboy tactic geek types about Carlo. There is an underlying sniffiness, I think, about him. And I think they do sort of try to paint him as just an epic horse wrangler. And I don't believe you achieve what he's achieved at all of the places he's achieved it over the years that because we're at 25 years now, Martin. I mentioned there about the Ferguson thing. I don't believe you can do that just because you're a nice bloke and they think you're cool. And just because he isn't someone who's very much a guy that you say, this is what he does, this is how his teams play. If you ask me what is Carlo Ancelotti's style, winning, I'm not sure that's a bad quality to have. And he's done it consistently throughout his period at various clubs who incidentally haven't been as successful when he hasn't been there. Now, maybe there's something in that. And I think to common or garden football supporter like myself, Carlo, we just got off. He's the daddy. He's absolutely brilliant. But I still get this sort of sniffiness about him from people who will go, system and tactics and innovation. So, yeah, for me, Carlo Ancelotti.
Okay, we'll speak about him later on. Jose's 5 for me. Again, if we had done this after 10, he would have been further up because Inter, as much as they are a storied club, have no business really being champions of Europe. I'm not entirely sure, and they certainly have a bit of a neurosis about that for quite a long time, and he was able to break that down, but we're not able to use 0910. What he did with Porto was brilliant, and he was following up another European triumph, a very special European triumph in the UEFA Cup. And yeah, he's down at 5 because should he have maybe done a bit more with Chelsea? Yeah, he would point to reasons, but he probably didn't manage that semi-final in 05 over the course as well as he probably should have. If you allow it to become margins, then don't complain when you get your arse bitten. And yeah, as I said, we enter. He's got great players, but I think there are far better squads kicking about Europe. So, although they did a lot of good business in 09-10, which we'll get to. So, yeah, he's. But what he is doing is shaping what's coming, of course. And I've got Josie in 5 and Pep in 6 because they're just about to do that. But at this moment, where we're stopping, even though we're stopping at a time where Pep's just won it, Mourinho's still the box office manager in Europe at this particular moment in history. So that's what's pipped him there. In 4th is Louis van Gaal. Again, could he have done more as a manager over this period? Almost certainly. But what he did with a young team in 95 was so special. And he's playing with great talent, but not talented, been there and done it and got loads of medals and experience upon which to rely in those moments. He has shepherded and used and marshalled and coached that side to a famous victory. You know how much, the final's not the best, but those 2 11s, I made this point before on various shows, I'm not sure there's been a Champions League final with 22 in terms of the 22 that took the field, a better and stronger 22, and not one player stands tall amongst them all. It's just such a concentration of talent, and the way he did it, it was a special moment in Champions League history. Some may mark him down for, well, okay, what did you do after the overture? But I think it was a hell of an overture.
No, I think that's fair. He's going to feature later on in mine as well. 4th for me is Marcello Lippi. Because he strode the 90s game like a colossus, as did Sir Alex, actually. And it's quite interesting to think that, though, I think you could label the argument at both. Well, we have on this show.
Well, I've got them 7th and 8th. I've got them just beside each other for exactly that reason. They did. If it's a conversation about European football, no question. So combining what they're doing in this competition and what they're doing domestically, and Jesus, what Serie A was at that time, is a hell of a different from what Manchester United were up to. But it's just, I'm disappointed. I'm not angry, David.
No, but I think he deserves his place here because that's a lot of Champions League finals to reach to, Martin. That's a level of consistency that up until Real in a period in the show that we won't cover, that's how long it took. I think that's a period of consistency that we had not seen. So I think the way that it was done as well, I think he sort of redefined Italian football in a way that's still being felt now, because you still hear it from uninformed British commentators. We know the Italians, it'll be all defensive. It's not defensive. And the reason it stopped being so defensive was what he did. And the side that he built with that amazing, front three that they had. There was still people who knew their way around a defensive challenge. There were still people like Conte and D'Olivio who knew their way around the shift. But there was also protection and room made for their creative players and real dazzling power Possibly, shall we say, caffeine-assisted power at times, I know, but it was still thrilling to watch in the flesh. Unfortunately, I had to witness my own team on the end of it at one point, and yeah, they were a sight to behold. So no, I think you do what they did in the mid-90s. You've got to be right up there, even though, yeah, you're right. One more, and I think the conversation changes a great deal.
It does.
But hey, that's a. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that I think you've got to take into account the entirety, the amount of games that you've got to be consistent across to reach those against good opposition. Yeah, I think he deserves it.
Okay, we're into the top threes now. You can go first.
Third for me is Jose Mourinho, and had this included 2010, he would have been first. Third, because he should have probably won it at Chelsea. I think that's a reasonable hypothesis as well. But again, I think if you look at what he did with Porto, and then it wasn't like at Chelsea they were going out in the group stage. You know, let's be honest here. But I think that his importance gets him in there, and the fact that he's Josie, so fuck it, it's my list. If I want him to have a medal, it means he's in the photo at the end, and yeah, Josie. And I've now put you in the position of having to argue against Jose Mourinho, which is absolutely antithetical to your very soul.
I can hear the arguments. Absolutely.
Also, this doesn't get enough. Jose changed the fashion for football managers, right? There was a lot.
Fashion. Yes, oh my God! Yeah.
There was a lot of bench coats. There were even at this level of football, people who felt comfortable standing there in joggies and a training top, right? Now, as I support Rangers,
boots on, David.
There are boots.
You're not fucking playing, you clown.
You are not playing. And why are you wearing joggies? You are not nipping out for milk. Jose was there. He would be in the tailored suit. He would be in the very expensive but very stylish overcoat. Even his scarves were magnificent. So that's an underplayed but very deserving quality as well. I mean, otherwise, did we really want a world where they were all wearing Arsene Wenger jackets over their joggies? No, I don't think we did.
No, listen, I won't argue against that. My third is Ottmar Hitzfeld. The historian in me has chosen Ottmar Hitzfeld. No business winning with Dortmund. Obviously followed that up eventually with Bayern, but for some nonsense at the end in the Nou Camp. There's another one there, very hard fought semi-final against Real, of course, in 2000. But I think what you're right about forgotten name. I think it's also forgotten just how, for a large part of the period that we're talking about, kind of straddling the middle, I guess, he was much sought after. Probably until Jose actually consistently. Some managers, we'll talk about one probably only exist at their club and indeed their nation. And it was probably felt that you couldn't really take him out of that particular club and it might not work. Hitzfeld, I think it was probably assumed as just a super coach. And he was a bit, Jose did up the game. But, Hitzfeld had some nice quotes on the touchline. But just I think what we've forgotten about is just how revered he was in the late 90s, early 2000s, as just a coach who could do a job anywhere. And yeah, that's why I've got Hitzfeld at 2. And second is Carlo. Totally understand that. Trying not to be influenced by what came. I don't think I am, 2 wins. But I think one of the things I've loved from doing this series in the recent years that we've done it is just how good that Milan side was. And again, a nonsense in Istanbul, a nonsense against Deportivo, and you're probably talking about a couple more. Now that's on him and his team, and just not managing very comfortable positions. And yep, I'm not disputing that. But you're talking about Lippi and longevity and kind of striding European football. I think that Milan side from 02-03 to 07 does that as well, and has got one more trophy to boot, and it's just. As I said in the show, as I said a minute, just a couple of games of utter nonsense against Liverpool and Deportivo La Coruña that probably stopped that being utterly sealed and stamped and authoritative, one of the greatest Champions League sides of all time in terms of a 4 or 5 year period. So Carlo for me.
No, I think, as I say, if you ask me who the greatest manager in Champions League history is, the day that the show comes out, for me, I don't even think it's arguable who it is. It was just a time period for me. And also, again, if you don't love Carlo Ancelotti, then I'm not sure we can be friends. Unless you're an Atletico Madrid fan, in which case it's acceptable.
Indeed, or a Barcelona fan, yeah. Your second down?
My second is Fabio Capello.
Okay.
I absolutely loved what he did with that Milan side, and it's funny because people remember Saki's great side and he was very important coaching, but it was Capello who took them on and made them into, I think, the side people actually remember. And you're absolutely right. He has been damaged by his spell as England manager in the UK, and that's really unfair because look at the talent he had to work with back then, although he did underachieve. But Rob Green was in goals. I mean, this was not a vintage.
By choice. I mean, it pains me to say who he probably should have picked as a young goalkeeper. But anyway, yeah. No, he had some things, as always with England, injuries foisted upon him. But the point I made, and I stand by it, his methods by the end of this period seem prehistoric.
They are, but I can never forget that victory because that was coming up against Cruyff, that was coming up against this sublime side, and it was honestly, Martin, just tapping them on the head and sitting them down and saying, oh, this is nice, but this is how a real club. And we go right back to the start, men. That's what that night felt like. A lot of kind of showy teenagers up against a bunch of hard-bitten men. And I think that there was just something incredible in that. And I'm a Serie A fanboy, so yeah.
I think then we've got the same winner.
Yes, I think we do.
Unless you're going to pull a fucking rabbit out of nowhere and go with Ramon Goethals for some reason, then yeah, Vincente Del Bosque.
Vincente Del Bosque.
2 wins, and there's others with 2. Again, for me, this kind of circus of a club, and he's coming in at its most big top, I think, and is just able to smooth things over, get results. 2 quite different teams in 2000, 2002, and yeah, it didn't seem that was coming. Those Champions League wins, certainly the first one in 2000, even though they'd only won it in 98. The place was a shambles, obviously. And yeah, there's a manager about him. Again, how well he works outside of Real Madrid, I'm not entirely sure.
We did all right with Spain.
Okay, how detach the Spain from Real Madrid, though.
I know what you mean.
I mean, other clubs going, could we tempt him away? And is he going to work in Serie A? I don't.
Probably not. No.
Right place, right time, and just manage them well.
I just realised, by the way, that Louis van Gaal isn't in my top 10, and before anyone screams at me, I'd forgotten him. Like, he should have been in, right? He would go in. If we were doing the wild card on the draft, I'd stick him in before anyone gets upset at me. But yeah,
Hector Cooper, Jesus.
Hector, right? Okay, yeah, he's out, and Louis in, and probably would go up a couple of places. He's on my list. Like, I've got him here, but I've just realised I've written 13 names, and then thought I'd be very clever because I'd ejected 2. You know, that way I was like,
there's no Bengals Scottish Cup final in 1999.
Yeah, I
we're
thought,
only allowed 2 subs. Oh fuck!
I thought I'd been very clever because I'd actually eliminated 2, but I was 1 down. But you covered them very eloquently anyway, so he would have been top 5. But yeah, Del Bosque for me, because right, what Real Madrid are, to our younger listeners, were what we had growing up being told they were, and what they had been, but they weren't. You know, you and I grew up in the 80s and 90s. They were famous.
Yeah,
you know? And if you spoke to any Scottish person over the age of 50 in the 80s, they would tell you how amazing Real Madrid were. But, you know, it was the Trigueño and Hugo Sanchez era. It wasn't what it is. He's the man who returned them to this and made them into the Champions League dominating behemoth that they are. And, you know, the Decima was obviously vitally important and whatnot, but, you know, they won 5 in the 50s and did so, you know, playing some, or early 60s, and did so playing some remarkable football. But our generation heard about Real Madrid, but couldn't actually see it. It's not daft as it is. See in the kind of 90s, Barcelona were the bigger side to us because we'd seen a lot more of them. You know, even going back to 86, even, and right, they shattered their head. By the way, you're talking about choking them against Stoya in that final. But you know, we'd seen them in 92 and 94, and Real Madrid were a big name, but you know, they didn't. I mean, it wasn't that they didn't win it; they were only troubling the scorers. Then they won it in '98, and it actually felt novel to me. And you and I discussed this on the show.
But 2000's different.
Yeah, after Del Bosque,
even though it's only 2 years, right? It just felt
the teams
different.
Are wildly different. Yeah, wildly. And Del Bosque, after he left, they were back as the supreme side, the biggest club in the world, and they have this DNA. Now, it laps a little bit under Pep, but history has shown us that was an anomaly, right? And Barcelona are still now struggling to try and get back to that, never mind the level of dominance that they had. To me, the European Cup, Champions League, the sides, the definitive sides, are on the podium, Liverpool and AC Milan, but the unquestioning lords and masters are Real Madrid. But he was absolutely vital in turning that. And in a way, by the way, that Zidane will get that praise in the future for doing it. I think Del Bosque does suffer a little bit from guys who make it look easy, so we assume it's easy. I don't think it is. You know, I don't think Del Bosque or Zidane or Carlo are doing it. You know, they're just turning up for work and everything falls into place. We've spoken a lot on the show, and we've spoken a lot tonight about teams who maybe, if only they'd just, you know, if they'd crossed the finishing line. Well, Real do all the time. And that is why, I mean, it's still, the last final they lost, European final they lost, was Aberdeen in 1983. I mean, that is wild. That's absolutely staggering, especially when you consider the amount that they reach. But yeah, Del Bosque to me was the guy who really put in, and it wasn't easy. You know, I mean, chairman every year going, we're buying this guy. Look, or what a balance this side we've got. We've got Claude Makelele, best defensive midfielder in the world. Or we're selling him to buy somebody who's a good player, but he's a right-sided midfielder and he's got lovely hair. It's not easy, but you have to work under those conditions. You can't say, I'm not doing it. You can't strop. You can't head out the door. And he delivered. And then, you and I, our admiration for Mourinho. He didn't manage in his time there. Despite, them spending money and getting wonderful players. It isn't easy. Managers have failed there. It's the most high profile, most high pressure club in the world. So, yes. Also, my dad is Northern Irish, and I grew up, I was born in the 70s, I grew up in the 80s. He has a moustache, obviously.
Yeah.
All of my uncles have a moustache. Yeah, but it's obligatory for Northern Irish Protestant men of that era to have moustaches. So I identify men with moustaches as good sorts, So he had a fine Mauser. I mean, like a well-kept, well-groomed moustache. So straight away there was a level of trust. I wonder if that's the case for the players. I wonder if they maybe had family in 1980s.
Yeah.
That had something to do with it. But like my dad, my Uncle Billy, my Uncle David, my Uncle Adrian, my Uncle Samuel, they all had fine Mausers, and Vicente Del Bosque. Arthur George was actually 12th just purely for his moustache.
Okay, that's us. We agreed a couple, and there was a bit of disparity on others. I guess what unconsciously, I think, but what led me to start this discussion, another discussion that I didn't think we would have much to go on, and here we are at an hour and 11 minutes, talking about Paisley.
Yeah.
Was a look at that for my top three: Del Bosque, Ancelotti, Hitzfeld. They're what I call managers. Hitzfeld may be more of a coach. Now, I understand what you're talking about Ancelotti. I think he's unduly criticised, downplayed. He's clearly not as simple as just, patting some hair and, just, sending the boys out for all the best. But he's not Mourinho, and he's not Pep.
He's not Pep, and he's not even Klopp.
He's not Cruyff and Saki that we started this kind of era talking about, and this DNA thing, this lineage thing. Nor is Del Bosque. I don't think Hitzfeld is either. They're managers who I think possibly are more in line with the Liverpool boot room of the early 80s in terms of creating a general structure, very clear structure, general standards at training and around the club and everything else, but an understanding that you're well paid, you're here for a reason, you sort things out if it goes wrong. And still, Real Madrid winning games that they look dead
at. Right to, yeah.
Not needing a half time.
No, that's not fair, but I know what you mean. That you're going.
But they are able to read a game and do what's required, and I think that's empowerment, and I think that's at odds slightly with Cruyff and Saki and their legacy. The ones who are heirs to their particular thrones in the current era. And it's just interesting that the three that came out, I don't think do come from that lineage, and are very much, I'll give you what you need, but ultimately we're not playing. You are, fix it, sort it. And that, I just found that striking. I didn't mean to do that. It was just when I looked at my list, I was like, oh, those three don't really fit with Mourinho or Pep or Capello. Capello maybe to a degree.
To a degree, not, there was also a huge sense of pragmatism. Do you know what I think the reason for it is? I would describe it as this. clearly you and I, and possibly it's a generational thing, incidentally, because possibly Adam, who's a bit younger than both of us, unfortunately, would go a different way. So we grew up in a slightly different generation. But for me, it's this. I think I'm, a reasonably intelligent guy. I've got a degree from university, right? I've proven in the past I can study. I think I could pay the money, go on a coaching course, and learn how to be a coach. I think I could. Not a world-beating one. There's still a level of genius involved. I'm not decrying it. But I don't think you can go on a course and learn how to become a manager. I think there are a lot of things, a lot of soft skills that you need to be able to do. I think you need to be able to do them more and more as football has evolved throughout this period. You have to be able to manage a group of incredibly well-paid, financially independent young men from various cultures, incidentally, from various parts of the world. You need to fit them together, and you need to keep them ticking over in high-pressure situations while still doing all the tactical stuff and the training sessions, making sure everything is done correctly. And you need to imbue them with a winning culture and a winning mentality and a strong mentality. I think that takes an awful lot at this level. So I think that you and I have admiration for possibly people that we would consider to have other skills as well as, coaching vision. Plus, you and I value pragmatism.
We do.
Therefore, these guys coming in and looking at what they've got, and they had, by the way, they had a lot.
Yeah, I mean, actually, a lot.
Yeah. Not every manager we've discussed today had a lot in comparison to, the vast majority of football managers in the world. But I value people who come in and look at it and go, what can I do to ensure success for my employer to achieve the goals I have been set? I think that's an underrated characteristic. And to me, I would rather have that than a manager who says, I play this way, that's it, regardless. Because I like managers who don't see their style as an end, they see it as a means. And to me, that's the right way.
What a fitting way to end our conversation on managers, the changing nature of managers over the time. Not sure they've changed that much at the fundamental level, but certainly aspects of it has changed out of all recognition. Cheers, Davey. We'll think of something else next week, and then hopefully we'll be back up to speed soonish. But yep, another enjoyable little ramble of an evening. Thank you.
Very much so. Yes, I enjoyed it too, mate. And if the listeners have any suggestions, I might as well make them do the work. If you've got anything you'd like me and Martin to have a wee discussion about, have a wee chat about, then just give us a shout in the comments as always. But no, I thank you very much, mate. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, I'm a man, so lists,
lists,
always. But tacking on a wee bit of conversation about 90s and zeros football is my idea of fun.
Yeah, indeed it is. Listeners, hope you enjoyed. Until next time, bye for now.
That was a Heart and Hand production.